I just saw a songbook last night. I don't really see too many of those things, but there's a lot of songs in those books I haven't even recorded.
He doesn't apologize. He doesn't explain. Bob Dylan simply listens. And when genius recognizes genius, the world takes notice. The man who rewrote the rules of songwriting rarely bows to anyone. But scattered across decades of interviews and quiet admissions, Dylan reveals the songs that stopped him cold, the melodies that made him wish he'd gotten there first.
I like to think of it more in terms of vision music. It's mathematical music.
From the Rolling Stones' raw heartbreak to Glenn Campbell's existential perfection, these 5 tracks represent something Dylan himself couldn't create. They're the songs that haunted him, the ones that proved even legends have their limits. 1. Angie. Some songs wear their pain on the surface. This one bleeds from somewhere deeper. When the Rolling Stones released Angie in 1973, they delivered a ballad so achingly vulnerable that even Bob Dylan had to admit defeat. In a 2020 New York Times interview, when asked which Rolling Stones songs he wished he'd written, Dylan named this track first. The admission reveals everything about what he recognized in those opening piano chords. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards crafted the song during a turbulent period. Richards was recovering from heroin addiction in Switzerland, and the creative isolation produced something neither man had touched before. The acoustic guitar work carries a Mediterranean warmth, while the lyrics dissect the end of love with surgical precision. Jagger's vocal performance abandons the swagger and strut. Instead, he delivers each line like a confession whispered in the dark hours before dawn.
I love that stuff. I look at it and I hear it, and it amazes me that...
The song climbed to #1 in the United States and cracked the top 5 in Britain. Critics initially dismissed it as too soft for the Stones, too far from their blues rock foundation. They missed the point entirely. Angie proved the band could strip away bombast and still devastate. The arrangement floats on strings that never overwhelm, on piano that knows when to speak and when to breathe. Every element serves the emotional core. The recording sessions took place at various studios across 1972 and early 1973. Nicky Hopkins played the memorable piano introduction that sets the tone for everything that follows. The Stones had always been capable of tenderness, but rarely this exposed. No guitar pyrotechnics, no stadium-sized choruses, just 2 men examining the end of something beautiful with clear eyes and broken hearts. Dylan understood what made this song untouchable. The Stones captured something he'd been circling his entire career, the moment when strength and surrender become the same thing. The protagonist isn't fighting or fleeing. He's standing in the wreckage of what was, acknowledging the beauty even as it disappears. Dylan had written heartbreak 1,000 ways across 100 songs. But this particular shade of goodbye, this specific texture of loss wrapped in gratitude, belonged to Jagger and Richards. They got there first. Dylan could only listen and wish he'd found those chords, that melody, that impossible honesty before they did. 2. Ventilator Blues. Some songs hit you in the gut. This one goes straight to the lungs. When Bob Dylan listed the Rolling Stones tracks he wished he'd written, Ventilator Blues made the cut alongside the bigger hits. Most people remember Angie or Wild Horses. Dylan remembered this raw, grinding piece of blues from the 1972 album Exile on Main Street. Mick Taylor wrote the music. The album came together in Keith Richards' basement in the south of France during the summer of 1971. The Stones were tax exiles, working in a makeshift studio with terrible ventilation and crushing heat. That suffocating atmosphere seeped into every note. The song drags and lurches like a fever dream. The guitar riff sounds sick, literally diseased. Taylor's slide work cuts through the murk with sharp, stinging lines. Mick Jagger growls the vocals like a man struggling for air. The lyrics paint pictures of illness and desperation. Everything about the track feels uncomfortable, claustrophobic, and necessary. Most bands would polish this kind of blues until it sparkled. The Stones left it dirty and difficult.
To make it through, all you have to make it through your time. Everybody is actually legendary in their own kind of way.
They understood that some feelings shouldn't sound pretty. Exile on Main Street became one of rock's most influential albums. Critics called it messy and unfocused when it first arrived. Time proved them wrong. The album captured something real about exhaustion, excess, and the cost of living on the edge. Ventilator Blues sits in the middle of that chaos like a beating heart struggling to keep rhythm. The basement sessions became legendary for their chaos and creativity. Musicians came and went at all hours. The recording equipment barely functioned in the humidity. Yet somehow that disorder produced pure magic. Dylan recognized the power in this approach. The Stones took traditional blues structure and made it sound genuinely dangerous again. They didn't just play the blues, they lived inside it and reported back from the depths. Dylan had spent years reimagining American folk and blues traditions, but this particular darkness, this specific kind of musical suffocation that somehow still grooves, belonged entirely to the Stones. They nailed something he could only admire from the outside. 3. Wild Horses. Some melodies arrive perfect from the first note. Wild Horses walked into the world fully formed in 1971. And Bob Dylan knew immediately he'd never write anything quite like it. When asked about Stones songs he wished were his, Dylan chose this alongside the band's grittier work. The contrast tells you something about his taste. Keith Richards started the song on acoustic guitar while waiting for his newborn son to sleep. The chords came quietly, tenderly. Mick Jagger added words about leaving someone behind, about duty pulling you away from love. Different stories claim different inspirations. Richards' heroin addiction, Marianne Faithfull watching Jagger's distance grow. The truth probably lives in all of it. The recording session at Muscle Shoals brought something magical out of the band. Jim Dickinson played piano, adding those haunting fills between verses. The Stones normally attacked their instruments. Here they held back, leaving space for the ache to breathe. Jagger's voice carries none of his usual sneer. He sounds young, vulnerable, genuinely hurt. Sticky Fingers arrived in 1971, and Wild Horses became an instant classic.
It's just as important as the music. There would be no music without the words.
Radio stations played it constantly. Other artists rushed to cover it. The Flying Burrito Brothers actually recorded it first, before the Stones released their own version. Country singers, soul vocalists, punk bands, everyone heard something they needed in those chords. Dylan built his career on emotional honesty, wrapped in poetry. He wrote breakup songs that changed how people thought about love and loss. But Wild Horses achieved something different. The song sounds completely open, stripped of metaphor or mystery. There's no hidden meaning to decode, just pure feeling translated directly into music. That directness made it untouchable. Dylan worked in symbols and stories. The Stones just said exactly what they meant and trusted the melody to carry the weight. Sometimes the simplest approach requires the most courage. Dylan heard that courage and wished it for himself. 4. Wichita Lineman. Bob Dylan called it the greatest song ever written. Not one of the greatest. The greatest. Period. Jimmy Webb composed Wichita Lineman in 1968 for Glenn Campbell, and it became something nobody expected. A 3-minute meditation on loneliness that somehow contains the entire American landscape.
I am a lineman for the county.
Campbell needed another hit after By the Time I Get to Phoenix. He called Webb asking for a new song, preferably with a place name in the title. Webb said yes, but hesitated. He'd grown tired of writing geographical songs. Still, he sat down at his piano in the Hollywood Hills and remembered driving through Oklahoma. Miles of flat nothing. Telephone poles stretching toward infinity. One solitary worker perched on the wires, doing his job in complete isolation. Webb wrote quickly, finishing in a couple hours. He sent Campbell a demo with a note warning the song wasn't complete. He'd only written 2 verses. No third verse. No proper ending. Campbell and producer Al DeLore listened anyway. Campbell cried. The song made him homesick for something he couldn't name. They recorded it immediately, unfinished verses and all. Campbell played guitar in a detuned style where the 3rd verse should have been. Webb added electronic organ sounds that mimicked telephone signals traveling through wire. Those eerie, spacey tones became the song's signature. The whole thing felt incomplete, open-ended, searching for something just out of reach. October 1968 brought the single to radio. It climbed to number 3 in America, number 1 in Canada, and planted itself permanently in the culture. The lyrics describe a lineman checking telephone wires, needing someone more than wanting them. hearing voices in the electrical hum. Webb captured working-class solitude without romanticism or condescension. Just a man doing his job, thinking about love, existing in vast emptiness. Dylan recognized genius when he heard it. Webb found poetry in the most ordinary American scene imaginable. A utility worker on a telephone pole became a symbol for every lonely person trying to maintain connection across impossible distances. The melody moves like highway hypnosis, repeating but never boring. The arrangement knows exactly when to swell and when to pull back. Dylan wrote about drifters and outcasts his whole career, but Webb's Lineman exists in a different kind of isolation. Not romantic, not rebellious, just quietly human. That ordinariness transformed into art stopped Dylan cold. He could only stand back and call it what it was. Perfect. 5. Garden Party. Bob Dylan covered this song in 2025 at age 83. He'd admitted years earlier he wished he'd written it. That's high praise coming from someone who basically invented the confessional singer-songwriter genre. But Ricky Nelson got somewhere first with Garden Party. Released in 1972 after a humiliating night at Madison Square, Garden changed everything.
No one heard the music. We didn't look the same.
Nelson started as a teen idol in the 1950s. America knew him from the television show where his real family played themselves every week. He sang clean-cut rock and roll while looking perfect. By 1971, he'd grown his hair long and wanted respect as a serious musician. The Oldies revival concert at Madison Square Garden seemed like a good opportunity. The crowd booed him. They wanted the young Ricky in a Letterman sweater singing, "Hello, Mary Lou." Instead, they got a 30-year-old man playing country rock with a scraggly beard. People actually shouted for him to get off stage. Nelson left devastated and angry. Then he turned that anger into the biggest hit of his entire career. Garden Party tells the whole story without bitterness. The narrator attends a party where nobody wants what he's offering. Mr. Hughes hid in Dylan's shoes, the song says, referencing how even Dylan got booed for going electric. But the chorus delivers the real message. You can't please everyone, so you better please yourself. Simple advice, revolutionary when you actually live it. The song climbed to number 6 on the charts in 1972. Rock stations played it. Country stations played it. Even the people who'd booed him bought the record. Nelson proved his point by having a hit with the very style they'd rejected. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Dylan understood what Nelson accomplished. The song takes a moment of personal failure and transforms it into universal wisdom about artistic integrity. No metaphors about hard rain or tambourine men, just honest storytelling about standing firm when the audience wants you to shrink back into who you used to be. Nelson died in a plane crash in 1985. Garden Party outlived him, becoming an anthem for anyone who ever chose authenticity over approval. Dylan heard that choice in every verse and recognized a kindred spirit. Sometimes the teen idol from television understands rebellion better than anyone expected. 5 songs. 5 moments when genius recognized genius. Dylan spent decades rewriting the rules of American music, but even legends have limits. These tracks represent the ones that got away. The melodies he heard too late. The honesty he couldn't quite reach. Sometimes the greatest songwriters simply have to listen and admire what others created first.